Welcome. You are listening to the Be a Better Being podcast hosted by Michelle Zellner and Sasha Berscheid. Michelle and Sasha are here to give you information and inspiration to help you live your healthiest, happiest lives. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Thank you for tuning into the Be a Better Being podcast. I'm Michelle Zellner, your host, joined by two lovely ladies. One of them, my side host, Sasha. How's it going, darling?
Hi, everyone. I miss you.
Well, I miss you too, but we are here today and we're going to have a fantastic conversation because, Sasha, this is a topic you and I have talked about, you and I have struggled with. We have both made some significant breakthroughs on it. And I know there are a lot of other people out there that have challenges around this as well. I am super delighted to invite Cassie Christopher onto the show. How are you today, Cassie?
I'm wonderful and so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So you and I have a couple of connections. I think you reached out to me on LinkedIn, but we have a mutual connection in Darian Parker as well as in Chase Sterling. And, you know, when I learned what you do, and if I'm going to try to get it right. You should
with joy.
Thank you.
Eat with joy rather than to seek joy. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I was like, wait, I know I just had it. Okay. So I thought that was such a beautiful way to articulate it, right? Because so many people, our relationship with food, our attitude about food, how we talk about good foods and bad foods, and we feel like super duper powerful because we eat certain foods and then super duper ashamed because we eat other foods. And the way you phrase it, I think is so perfect. And that's why I knew we were going to have a great conversation. So before we dive into that, let's give you the opportunity to give a little background, who you are, how you came to be a registered dietitian, and then we'll explore this conversation in detail.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm Cassie Christopher. I'm a registered dietitian and I specialize in helping people with binge, emotional eating, overeating. And then I love to go into workplaces and do workplace wellness stuff as well, sharing a similar message. And I got started with this topic in particular when I was in grad school. And I would end up at the school convenience store buying artisanal chocolate bars. Anyone from the Seattle area knows Theo's chocolate. I probably ate my weight in Theo's chocolate in grad school. And I found myself at that convenience store just about every day, if not several times a day, because I was using that wonderful chocolate to help me cope and get through the stress of grad school. And it became a problem after a while. You know, things started to change for me and I wanted to get my eating back in line with my values and what I knew to be good for me. And I found that using some of the restrictive strategies that were popular, you know, that was just when keto was starting to be a thing, or just a lot of elimination of different things was really popular at that time. And when I was doing some of these trends and fads, I found, sure, I would eat well, you know, kind of in parentheses, eat along with the guidelines for a while. And then I would end up back at the convenience store eating more chocolate than I wanted to admit to. And it wasn't until I was a dietitian and working with people for several years that I actually had my own breakthrough, because I started to notice that when we moralize food and believe that we are good if we're eating good food or bad if we're eating bad food, that doesn't work, that this all or nothing dieting isn't the answer. And instead what is to find the courage to trust. And that's the courage to trust that I'm good no matter what I eat, that I'm worthy of love and connection with other people and with myself, no matter what passes my plate. And I found that when I was using that standpoint for myself and encouraging that in my clients, that we naturally started to eat more in line with our values, that we naturally started to get joy from the eating experience instead of seeking it, you know, from a bar of admittedly really good chocolate.
I feel like you were speaking to me. Like I feel guilty on so many different, I'm like, that hurt. Yeah, I can relate.
Well, and I'm wondering, Cassie, growing up, like, what was the relationship with food? What was the conversation about food? How did that look in your family?
Yeah, I come from a long line of emotional eaters. I remember at the end of a long, hard day, my dad, out of love for my mom and us three girls, would go to the grocery store and buy everybody their candy of choice. Whether it was my mom loved payday bars, we would often get bars of Hershey's chocolate. Then the white chocolate came out, like we were following the trends in the grocery store candy aisle. And that was how I learned not only to love people, right? Because that's how I was seeing love done, like helping someone self soothe. But I also learned like this is how we make ourselves feel better. And so, yes, I come from a long line of emotional eaters. And so I come by it honestly. And I know there's many people who feel that way, who I talk to, whether it's a grandparent or a place they felt safe was with food. And so it's learning that food works to self-soothe. And in some ways, I'm glad it was food. Food's better than drugs, right? But in some cases, it almost works just as well.
Yeah, I think to your point that whenever, like, I think you said it was to get you through the stress of grad school. Whenever we are uncomfortable for whatever reason, we turn to something to feel better. And food is one of those socially acceptable ones. In fact, you're the weird one if you eat healthy, and there's always some commentary about what you are or aren't eating. And there's food pushers, right? Food is love. I mean, I've seen this. Sasha and I have talked about this over and over and over. It's love. It's what we do to celebrate. It's what we do to have that shared experience and connection to our culture. It's everywhere all the time. And it is not usually this beautiful salad with all kinds of vegetables and protein and delicious fat on it. It's usually some version of sugar that tastes delicious, and it's really hard to not eat it. And then it's really hard to stop eating it. And so it kind of becomes this cycle. And then you feel bad about eating it. And so you eat more to not feel bad. And it's just this really vicious cycle. So as you were growing up, is that part of maybe the reason you wanted to become a registered dietitian was to learn more about nutrition, maybe even to just get your own self situated with your behaviors?
Yeah, I think that became a part of my reason for being, my reason for throwing myself into the nutrition world when I was in grad school. But I would say when I was growing up, interestingly enough, we didn't really talk about food that much. There was the diets of the time. My parents were on them, Atkins, WW before it was that. All of those things, they were on them, but we weren't talking about nutrition or what was healthy so much. Not that I remember. So it really, I wasn't interested in food until I had some digestive issues in high school. I mean, so many of us, it's not until we have a problem, right? And I started seeing a dietitian, and she was able to help me. And I remember talking to her. This is finally, I was in college, and she left a message and said, "Oh, before finals, eat some walnuts and blueberries. It can help, brain food." And I was like, what are you talking about? Walnuts and blueberries to help with my finals? Like this idea that what I ate could have any impact on my performance or how I felt was completely new to me at that time. And that was really my inroads for becoming passionate about nutrition. And, now I think it's a much more well known for people that eating throughout the day is going to give you energy throughout the day, and some of these things that I had no idea about back then.
I think about my time in college and how badly I want to go back and just hold her and tell her food is not your enemy and you need to eat. When you were saying that, I cringed on the inside, and I just thought about all the times that, so I played soccer. I played Division I soccer, and we played a lot, and we exercised a lot, and we lifted a lot, and I wouldn't eat. And then it would go follow into that binge eating. And then when I would eat, it wasn't the right thing, or I would medicate myself with alcohol. And I just think back and of the athlete I could, like, I was good, right? I was great, but like of who I could have been had I just listened and loved myself and nurtured her.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I know that so many people can relate using food as a way to control your body and control your circumstances and shutting off. I mean, all or nothing dieting really encourages shutting off the internal cues, whether we're hungry or full. It encourages shutting off our desires, whether we even want to eat for comfort. Don't listen to that. Who cares that you need soothing, right? Go take a walk instead. And it never does the same. I know that so many people can relate to that idea of, I've heard people say that they've used food in the past to abuse themselves. And that word is so, it's an extreme word, but I think it relates, right? In our hearts, we kind of go, yeah, oh yeah, that's what I was doing, when instead what I maybe wanted or needed was care and compassion. And that's why one of the key tenets of the Courage to Trust method, to regain this trust in yourself with food, is actually self-compassion, because that self-kindness and self-love that you're talking about is critical to be able to use food for joy rather than, some other way.
Cassie, I want to circle back to something you said a little earlier that, we know so much more than we did before, that you eat all day to keep your energy up. And yet, time and again, in my experience, people still aren't doing that. I do a lot of coaching on all of this, and time after time, they're hardly eating anything, or they're not eating anything all day long. And then they wonder why they can't stop eating later. So I agree, we know so much more, and yet people are not doing it. And I have lots of friends who have, kids that are in their tweens and teens, and kids are not eating. They're still not eating. And so this is not anything that we've really gotten better as a society about. So is there any way, do when you work with an adult, to then help them maybe really model some good behavior for their kids, so that the kids don't grow up having these issues that we all had? What's that process like in this, Courage to Trust method with them as well?
Oh, I love that. I mean, such great questions. Thank you, Michelle. And as you're talking, the thing that I'm thinking about is part of the courage to trust is the courage to trust that you're doing the best you can in the moment, at all moments, even if your best in that moment is not the behavior that you want it to be. And very often it's not, right? And so if we believe that we're doing the best we can, that, maybe the people we're coaching are doing the best they can, then instead of blaming ourselves or blaming food, because neither of those things are actually the problem, we can start to get support in the way that we really need it. And so, for example, for the people who, know that they should, and I really don't like the word should, it's a big red flag for all or nothing thinking, but let's go with it because this is the self-talk. If someone knows they should be eating during the day, but they're not, okay, if we assume the problem isn't that person, we can say, what is it? Is it that they have this typical American super busy lifestyle and there's just literally no time, or they're not prioritizing the time, maybe in some cases as well? If you have more privilege in your life, maybe you do really have the time, but you're not prioritizing your own self-care. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe it's the all or nothing dieting and diet culture messaging that tells you that you are more worthy of love and connection with other people when you're not eating, and that you're more valuable when you're smaller, right? So as I'm talking, you're probably thinking to yourself, whoa, these are big issues, right? So not eating during the day is a tip of the iceberg. And it's not that someone is just repeatedly failing. It's that there's a real barrier that they need support with, and they need support, whether it be from someone else or just from themselves, to stop problem solving themselves or problem solving food, and instead give themselves the benefit of the doubt and look and see what's really going on. And those things that I listed, if it's, this belief that your value rests on how much you eat, okay, that's going to be a really big issue to solve. And it's going to make a big difference in what you eat. And if it's this belief that, you need to hustle and you shouldn't take time for self-care because your care is not, as valued as some other type of capitalistic output, right? these are bigger issues that we need to look into that impact someone's relationship with food, and it has nothing to do with the food itself.
This makes me think of someone that we're family friends with, and they are so hard on themselves because they just can't seem to lose the weight. And they cut out drinking and they move and all this stuff. But then, what do I do? How do I tell them you're stressing yourself out even more by not taking care of yourself? And I watch them take out their emotions with food. And it's just like that giant cycle that's like, I eat because I'm sad and I'm sad because I eat type of thing. And like, how would you recommend going about it as a friend who I want to see them blossom, but their stressors are holding them back, and their stressors really aren't food. They're using food to cope with their stressors.
100%. And, the beautiful thing about thinking about what we would say to our friends is that's commonly a prompt that is used to help us learn to be more compassionate to ourselves, because we often don't know how to speak kindly to ourselves. And so we can practice, what would I say to someone who I really care and I really love? And, in that case, I have these conversations with people all the time. This is what I do. And so how I would approach it would be first recognizing for myself what's going on, exactly like you have, that there's self-soothing behaviors that are happening as a result of stressors, and that the attempt to control eating and control the body are creating more stress and more need for self-soothing. The other thing that we need to realize, and I just want the audience to hear this, is that it is a well-documented fact that fad dieting, all or nothing dieting, this restrictive dieting that we often do to try to control our bodies, food, ourselves, our situations, that this dieting leads to low self-esteem and disordered eating. And when you get on the cycle of eating to soothe and then feeling guilty and eating more, right? Like, this is when we start to get, and restricting in there first, this is when we start to get those disordered eating patterns. And so recognizing, first of all, that what's happening is very common, and it actually happens to most people. I would almost say all, but there's always the exception right there, who do this restrictive fad dieting. And there was a great research article posted recently in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and they have this visual that shows when people do the fad dieting, it ends in low self-esteem and disordered eating. But if someone gets support to change their behaviors in an evidence-based, supervised way, it actually results in greater self-esteem. It does not result in disordered eating, and very often results in meaningful change. And so, not to say that, 50, 100-pound weight loss is going to be realized, because I think that's unrealistic. And those are the claims of, the industry out there. But meaningful change to where you're feeling better and having some improvements in your health is a reasonable expectation if you're getting support from a qualified professional. So all of that to say, we have to understand the facts that, the restrictive eating doesn't work and it makes things worse. And then to talk about it would just be, what I would do is say, here's what I'm seeing and I love you. Do you see this too? That curiosity. And of course, she's going to see it too. She's living it. And to say, have you thought about getting some support to find other ways to soothe beyond food? And it takes, the courage to trust method includes first calming the nervous system. So we're reducing the overall stress as much as possible. The second is self-compassion. Again, like I mentioned, we're being kind to ourselves. The third pillar is listening to yourself. So learning what your needs are so that you can meet them without food. And lastly, medical nutritional therapies, that evidence-based support of your goals. And And so it's a process to walk through to get that supportive relationship with food and your body where you're eating with joy rather than eating to seek joy.
And I think you just hit on one of the biggest obstacles. It's a process. Nobody that I know wants to go through the process. Everybody I know wants the result. And in my own experience, for me personally, as well as the hundreds of people I've worked with, it isn't until they fully understand that there is no quick result without some consequences, and there is no lasting result if it comes quickly. And they've gone down that diet road once or 20 times or 100 times, and they finally realize, okay, it's time to do it differently. It's only when they themselves have embraced that idea that this is going to be hard. It's going to be a process. I'm not going to have this quick result that I'm looking for, and I'm okay with it, that they actually will then maybe reach out to somebody like you and go through this. I guess my question, number one, is that also what you see? And number two, how can we encourage people to get there quicker? So maybe they go down the diet road once instead of 10 or 20 or 50 times.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yes, 100, 1000%. That is exactly what I see. And I can relate. Oh my gosh. When I set a goal, like I get excited about it and I want to reach it tomorrow. And I'm tired of this taking the steps nonsense and learning from my mistakes nonsense. No thanks. And, even for myself, I see all the advertising out there and I'm like, wonder if that thing really works, so, and I talk to my clients who, they're committed to this process and they're like, God, I saw this commercial today and it really made me want to go do the thing, even though I know it doesn't work, but they're so convincing, right? So not only are we wired to want that quick result, especially because food immediately lights up our brain, we get the dopamine from it, whether it be a super restrictive diet, which makes us feel like we're in control and we're, winning, or it be eating, which lights us up and makes us feel really good. The middle road of moderation and learning to respect yourself and your body with food and nourish yourself and what you need and, coming to terms with your desires and holding space for pleasure, all of that, like, it's a longer road and it's kind of a hard road to hoe, to be honest. And so for me personally, what has changed the view, and I can really only share what's worked for me, is I saw this pattern within myself and I created an affirmation for myself that I would write out daily when I was really struggling with this. And that affirmation was, there is joy and meaning in the journey. Because I needed to remind myself this thing that I knew and did believe, kinda, right? That like there is value to going through a process even beyond the outcome. And I believe that's true in our relationships with food. What I see happen is, especially for people who are struggling with binging or a lot of emotional eating, that once we get the eating behavior under control, what we find is that behavior was covering up, it was the tip of the iceberg. It was covering up a mountain of things. Often as women, there's this, we have to come to grips with our identity as, from the book Burnout, they talk about being human givers rather than human beings. This idea that we're meant to care for other people rather than care for ourselves. Maybe we have to deal with spiritual beliefs and ideas around, whether or not pleasure is a good thing, whether it be pleasure from food or in other ways, or our desires are okay. Does that make us selfish? Like, our relationships with other people that are causing us pain or not, or boundaries or not, right? Like there's a lot underneath it, is the point I'm trying to make. And so the journey ends up being, when it comes to this kind of food relationship that we're talking about, always much greater than anyone ever anticipated. And they get to, not necessarily the other side, because that's the other thing about emotional eating and binge eating, is as humans, we're wired to emotionally eat and we're always going to do it to some extent, but it's doing it with joy and allowing the food to work for you and giving yourself permission and not feeling out of control, versus the guilt and the shame. And so, once people get to a place where they can enjoy food that way, they look back and are like, wow, I can't believe everything that this food habit was hiding. I really had a big journey to go on, and food can be that vehicle.
That's incredible. I love everything that you just said. You have mentioned courage to trust a couple times, 2 or 3 times already. What is this? What is this courage to trust? Where do I find it? How do I get on board? Like, can you tell me more about this?
Yeah. So the courage to trust is what I named my methodology. And so it is essentially recognizing that you are trustworthy, your body is trustworthy, and that you are good already. You don't need to change what you're eating to get to that place. But it takes a lot of courage to believe that, because all or nothing dieting tells us that unless we're strictly following, XYZ, then we're not healthy. Like right now, intermittent fasting is the rage. And I have people coming to me all the time going, oh, I thought I was doing okay, but I'm not intermittent fasting. And all the articles are saying I have to intermittent fast if I don't want to get diabetes, right? But it is the courage to believe in the face of, the diet culture, right? That you're good as you are. And if your behaviors are not in line with what you want them to be, they're not in line with your values, that doesn't mean that you're still not trustworthy. And if you're having a lot of cravings because your biology is in such a way, your hormones are imbalanced, or you're just not eating enough during the day, like Michelle said earlier, and so you're hungry later, that doesn't mean that your body isn't trustworthy. It just means your body needs support so that you can really count on it. So when I say courage to trust, I'm talking about the fact that your body is good, and so are you. And what you eat can't change a single fact about that. And I also recognize that it takes so much courage to believe that. And it takes those other things I mentioned: calming the nervous system, self-compassion, listening to yourself, getting evidence-based support, that those are the pillars you need in order to develop that courage to trust.
It's such a great method. And I think it really taps into the missing piece for so many people, right? Because they just think they have no willpower. That's why they turn to food. I know for me, I'm way older than both of you. When I grew up, we were taught that fat is the devil. And if you eat fat, you'll get fat. And so even when I decided I was going to be good, I was going to start eating healthy, in my mind, that meant don't eat fat. And then all that did was set me up for eating sugar, because of course, if you're not eating fat, you're eating sugar. And then the blood sugar spikes and then it crashes and then you go eat more sugar. So I know for me, a foundational piece of getting over the emotional eating and the very unhealthy relationship with food was actually to understand how food affects the body. And we are not taught that. Our kids are not taught that in school. Adults are not taught that. And so many things out there that are still out there, that are still being promoted, even by like the big powers that tell us how we should be living our lives to be healthy. It's wrong. So what level of just like basic nutritional education of how to actually feed a human specimen, how much of that is involved in like this courage to trust method, or just when you work with somebody?
Yeah. I'm a registered dietitian by trade, so I can't help but talk about food. And, one of the first things that I work on with people is exactly what you said: helping people get to a place where they are nourished, where they feel nourished and they are nourishing themselves throughout the day. And, I love the idea of intuitive eating. I don't know if you've worked on that with before or talked about that before, but often the misconception there is, eat when you're hungry, don't eat when you're not, which is true if your body is a good thing, if your body is giving you signals at the time that you need them. But after decades of all or nothing dieting, your body isn't telling you when you're hungry. Your body isn't telling you when you're full. So there's some work that needs to be done before you can, rely on that as your mode of operation. And so exactly, eating regularly, eating throughout the day. I actually recommend people get a big breakfast in, make sure they're getting lots of protein, make sure they're getting that healthy fat, the fiber. I love it. People listening can't see Sasha doing the happy dance over a big breakfast. But when you're eating during the day and eating regularly throughout the day, honestly, that gets rid of like 75 to 80% of food cravings. And that also helps to calm the nervous system, because when your blood sugar is balanced because you're eating, you're going to have less anxiety, you're going to have more energy, you're going to feel better. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that is really the way to go. And the beautiful thing about that is when you're less besieged by all of these cravings, then you can start to do that deeper work on your relationship with food.
Exactly. So, listeners, I know you heard Cassie. You heard her say protein. You heard her say fat. And you heard her say fiber. Right?
Fiber.
What is that? That is PFF. What has Michelle been saying for decades? PFF is your BFF.
FF.
Exactly. Steady blood sugar, it is the key to your life. And that is how you get steady. And you've heard Cassie say steady blood sugar. I think what people fail to understand is that hunger is a stressor on the body, right? Back in the day, if you didn't eat, it's because there was no food to eat. Your human is going to help you survive this food shortage, which could turn into a famine. And it's going to do that by kicking out cortisol, slowing down metabolism, conserving energy, screwing up a whole bunch of other methods of instruction with your hunger hormones, your blood sugar regulating hormones. None of it is going to work. So somehow, if anybody is still thinking that hardly eating anything all day is a good thing, and I hear this over and over and over and over. Oh, I do so good all day. And in their mind, that means I hardly ate anything. And I don't know how we bust out of that. Actually, just did a coaching session with a lady, and we were going through her food for the day. And calorie wise, it's okay. But I told her she's malnourished. And she was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I don't see nutrition in what you're eating. Yes, there's calories, and some of it is very healthy calories, no doubt about it. High quality, nutrient dense calories. But as an overall, what your human needs, I would say you are malnourished." And that was like such a mind blowing concept to her, because I think so often we simply look at it in terms of calories rather than looking at in terms of what are these foods offering my body so it can function. So there are so many layers to all of this, and I always believe that if you nourish yourself properly first, the emotional piece is so much easier to address. But if you are not nourished properly, the emotional piece is nearly impossible to overcome. Is that a similar message, Cassie, that you have?
Totally, totally. I would add nourishment and emotional regulation, that if you can have those two things, what was once a problem is no longer a problem. And the other thing I want to point out is this idea that I was doing so good all day. I jotted that down, and one place we can start to turn the tide on our own internalized beliefs of all or nothing dieting. And again, like, this is the water that we swim in that pits us against ourselves and pits us against food. And so we have to work pretty hard to unlearn, and really it's like cult deprogramming in my mind. So if we want to deprogram ourselves from this all or nothing dieting, the best place to start is with our thoughts. And if you're out there and you notice that you say, "Oh, I was so good, I ate all day," well, the opposite of good is bad. So calling yourself good, or calling what you eat good because of the food or what you ate, that's all or nothing. And it's conditional then, because if you don't eat, in line with your values, would be another way to say that, then you're eating bad and you are bad, right? So it's not the courage to trust. It's the opposite. It's that all or nothing dieting. And you could watch for words like good and bad, and should is another one that signals that you're probably operating out of that all or nothing mindset.
I love that approach. I think so often we're just so busy doing and trying to get along, and we don't take the time to listen, to really, evaluate the words that we're saying, to contemplate, to reflect on them. So that is such a big piece of this. I love that you incorporate that. Sasha, any final questions before we officially wrap up today?
No, I think your message is absolutely beautiful. I know I'm guilty. I'm human, so I'm guilty of a lot of these things. Some days I extend grace, and some days I beat myself up. But every day I'll take what you said and put my own twist to it. But every day I remind myself that I'm doing the best that I can with what I have. And if I close out the night and I ask myself, did I do everything with love, out of love and pure intent? Yes. And did I do the best I can with what I have? Yes. Then you know what, Sasha, you are blessed. I mean, even if I didn't do the best that I could with what I had, I'm still blessed. I'm still alive, and I'm still able to watch my children and be able to walk and do all these things and be able to talk. And everything that you said is so beautiful, and I can't wait for our listeners to hear this. And I most certainly would love for them, if you have anything else that you could share with them, ways to get your content or anything like that, like, please let us know, because I know that this is so informational and educational.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. To anyone out there who is struggling with eating outside of their values, like I said earlier, you might describe it as binging or emotional eating or overeating, whether that be you're eating an entire bag of chips or you're going back for way more salad, than you want to be eating. Because I get that a lot too. People are going, I'm eating healthy food, but I'm just really still using it to soothe, right? If you know that's going on for you, you can go to my website, CassieChristopher.net. And at the top of the page, there'll be a guide. It says Stop Food Obsession. It also is called the Cravings Busting Audio Guide. You can click that, and it's a 10-minute audio guide that I've designed for you. So if you like the silky sounds of my voice, this is for you, where I am walking you through an exercise, a mental exercise that you can do when you're experiencing a very strong craving or a very strong desire to eat, or you've just had, one plate of food or even 2 plates of food, and you know that you're physically full, but you just want a little something extra. In those moments, you use this audio guide, and it helps you reconnect to your body. It decreases your stress. It gives you self-compassion and words to use. I help you, because sometimes we're like, I don't know how to be nice to myself. So I give you words to use in the moment. And most people find when they're done that they actually don't need to eat anymore. And I'll say this: give yourself permission to go eat, even if you still want to when you're done, and then you'll actually do it. Because otherwise you'll go, oh, I don't want to do this audio guide. It's not going to let me eat, right? So we have to have the permission to do it afterwards. That's the one hint. But go download that at CassieChristopher.net. Use it. It is the same exercise I use with my clients, myself, and we all find it very useful.
That is fantastic. We'll have all of your information in the show notes for people to check that out. I'm going to check it out for sure, and to get in contact with you as well. So you do have a silky sounding voice. I love it. I know a lot of listeners are going to really resonate, not only because of that silky voice, but because of that message. It is so spot on. And it's, I think, a new approach from what we've talked about on this podcast before. So Cassie, thank you so much for joining us today. And everybody listening, you know that now you get to go and be a better being.
Thank you for listening to the Be a Better Being podcast. Michelle and Sasha hope that what you heard today inspires you to embrace this journey of life with an open mind, a kind heart, and a willingness to learn and evolve. If you enjoyed the content, please help spread their message by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. If you have a show topic idea or would like to be a guest, please visit betterbeings.net and fill out a contact form. Until next time, go and be a better being.